everyone. Welcome back to Lorebeards. We have a super duper special episode this week because we've got the one and only David Guymer here with us, Black Library author and prolific writer. A lot of amazing stuff. I've got a ton of his books over here on my shelf. So thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Nice to be invited. It's always nice to talk to people because until someone like you comes along and asks me to come and talk about my books, I wouldn't know if anyone was reading them, to be honest. Just sat here in my little home office.
Oh man, well, hopefully
away, just talking to my editor, making fan fiction.
Well, I appreciate your fan fiction quite a bit. So many different places to kind of start, but I think just to kind of get us kicked off, so you've written quite a few different things and been like involved very heavily with like Warhammer Fantasy and going into Age of Sigmar and all this kind of stuff. Probably it's hard to even like pick a favorite for the stuff you've written because you've written so many awesome things. But like something I've been working with quite a bit is like your Queek Headtaker novel. And it's such a awesome delve into like Skaven culture, Skaven ideology, and like really approaching Queek, who's such an insane, bizarre character in a lot of ways. What was kind of the method behind the madness, so to speak, of like coming to approach a character like Queek, who even for Skaven standards is like he's kind of a lot.
Well, so Headtaker was obviously my first for Black Library and my first published novel at all. So I probably did a lot without even thinking about it that I might not even attempt now, just because I didn't know what I was doing. I thought that sounds fun. Let's do that and throw that in there. And whereas if I was now, I'd probably be planning a novel. I'd go, no, that's far too much. I can't put all that into one book. But so where I was coming from, so Skaven was what I knew. That's what I'd always played as a kid. I started playing Warhammer when I was 13, and I started with Skaven, and I never played anything else. I right to the end. I'd occasionally try something. I'd stop playing for a year or two, and then I'd come back. Let's do something else. Let's be Empire, so I can have horses. And no, I'll be back to my Skaven again.
It's like, I'll just start a new Skaven campaign for a little bit and just keep going back there.
And I'm trying to remember now if he had appeared in anything at all. So I'd read C.L. Werner's Thanquol novels, and they were kind of a big inspiration with what I wanted to write, kind of the themes. So Doom of Thanquol in particular, I'd read. It's a long time ago now, so I'm understandably a little fuzzy on the specifics, but I remember there was a character who...
Yeah, Queek does show up in Doom of Thanquol briefly.
Yeah, I thought he might have done.
Yeah, it's a brief appearance, but he does show up and cause the whole like accidentally summoning of Scarbrand incident that is like one of my favorite Thanquol moments, probably.
So that was probably where the basic idea of his madness came from, because I don't think it really crops up in his his little entry in the Warhammer Armies book. And I guess it's then just riffing off that, playing off that. I remember kind of imagining him as those Chuck Norris jokes of you don't find Chuck Norris, Chuck Norris finds you, and all these things about there's this and then there's this Chuck Norris doing this, and that was how I imagined Queek. He was this, and then there's Chuck Norris doing this. That's Queek. And with a little bit of Drusilla from Buffy the Vampire Slayer thrown in for the mad side. And that fusion, those two things, was my Queek Headtaker.
That's so it's shocking that's like your kind of first foray, considering like A, how wonderful of a book it is, and B, like it's had such a hilarious impact on a lot of fandom for the character. Like Queek is probably this in my experience, kind of with a lot of the fan community, probably like the second most beloved, right behind Thankful, as far as people who just adore the Skaven. And the book does such a good job of really expanding on a lot of aspects of Skaven culture just beyond Queek himself. Though Queek is such a hysterical character because he just doesn't. It's so funny watching the Skaven trying to have all these rules about how their culture works, how their society works, and Queek's just this wrench just thrown into things, which is such a brilliant execution of the character.
Yeah, something I guess I do it with a few characters in that book. So trying to show Skaven culture and Skaven psychology through characters who are a bit different, like Queek, or characters who exemplify it to such extremists that they're different in their own right. So, like his bodyguard, Scar, he's so scared of Queek that he actually becomes brave.
Yeah.
But because he
loyal Scar.
Yeah. Because he doesn't want to disappoint Queek, because he's more scared of Queek than of anything else. And the Grey Seer, who's just a ridiculous coward, despite how powerful he is. He's outrageously cowardly. It wasn't even in the plan. It just sort of became a bit of a joke. He was absent from the first fight because he's so scared, and then he just then had to be absent from all the other ones as well because it became his thing.
Yeah, well, it was so funny reading through that book and realizing when you get to the end that the Grey Seer technically survives all the just horrible stuff he goes through, only to go get knocked down the stairs by by the Council of 13 in the end, which is such a hilarious ending for the character that he just tries to like go complain to the manager and it just doesn't work out for him.
he actually appears again in my Blood Bowl short story.
Does he really? Oh my god, I did not know that. That's amazing.
I don't know if you read that, but if you haven't, you should go and read it, because I'm sure you'll appreciate the
yeah, that is huge on my to-do list. So going kind of from okay, I do have to ask, as far as like just kind of some fun questions about your personal thoughts on it. So Queek, with being with Clan Moors, do you have a particular favorite Skaven clan? Like, were you just kind of tapped to write Queek and had a really good time with it, or is there any particular clan you found yourself drawn to, as far as like you really liked using them, or just like their lore and themes and stuff like that?
I was asked to write Queek. I had the Queek model, but I'd actually he's probably not around on my desk. I'd converted him into my own Warlord, and I got my mate who was really good at that sort of thing.
I like to.
He knocked an arm off and stuck they were metal, lead in those days, guys. And he'd pinned a demonette claw under one arm, and he was my my mutated Warlord. Claw was always my favourite character, just from reading the background. I always liked his background, but they weren't so. Army lists didn't restrict you to the clans in those days when I was playing. So I mean, I play a bit now, but not as much. I tend to play the more skirmishy games now, like Shadespire and Warcry and all that sort of stuff.
Okay, I gotcha.
Because space, time, and mostly. But no, I didn't really have a preferred clan. I guess I would say Skya. I mean, I did like the Doom Wheels and the Weapon Teams and Lorebeards. So without really thinking about it, I was tending towards Skya.
Awesome, excellent. So after kind of working with a lot of Skaven stuff, writing that novel, you also did a ton of stuff with dwarves, and are continuing to do stuff a lot with Dwarden, kind of in the modern day. But kind of reaching back, you wrote for Gotrek and Felix for a little while, and of course you've become very important to the Gotrek saga kind of since then. Do you have any kind of like particular memories or thoughts about when you first started with Gotrek and Felix and the stories you wanted to kind of tell for the dynamic duo within the Warhammer Fantasyverse?
I guess I'll first start off saying I never really thought much about dwarfs before doing Headtaker, but of course they were like a third or a half of the book, and I got to know them and love them even through writing that.
Yeah, that book
Finding
made me
what
fall in love with Cazador Dragonslayer. Like, it's like this is the Dwarf King. Like, it was great. I love his character's depiction.
So if I were to get an Old World army now, whenever Old World comes out, I probably would be dwarfs because, yeah,
You full convert.
I did fall hard for them writing Headtaker. But the Gotrek, so I first started writing, I got in with Black Library through an open submission window in 2011, I think it was. And that was for a short story about Skaven, because of course Skaven's what I know. And it was accepted, and they said, could you rework this into a Gotrek and Felix story for an anthology? I said, okay. And I did, and then I think this was even before writing Headtaker. I wrote the audio Curse of the Ever Living for Gotrek and Felix. And then there was Headtaker. Because I remember going to a Black Library Live event when I had like absolutely nothing. I just had this short story and this audio CD. And then I can't remember if it was Thorgrim or it was City of the Dam next. City of the Dam for Gotrek and Felix, and then Thorgrim. And then I think that was my dwarf credentials cemented then.
Yeah, and just like awesome stuff. Of course, you also got tapped to write the ending for the Gotrek and Felix saga. Was that like kind of a I imagine that was a little intimidating when they kind of were like, hey, so we're finally bringing this to a close and you're gonna cap it off.
yeah. Obviously, I remember when I was told I was at an event in Scarborough with in the UK with Laurie Golding, the editor at the time, who since moved on. And I do remember it was like what, you want me to finish? And like, yes, and no, all at the same time. Because obviously you do not want to mess that up.
Life, don't do this.
You don't want to mess that up. And this was even in the days of social media in its infancy. Not worried so much about people attacking you on Twitter or whatever. But yeah, it was an.
Well, I mean, I know I can only speak for myself, but I have to say I think you did a beautiful job of finishing off the Gotrek and Felix series. Like, the End Times has a lot of criticisms and there was a lot of mess, but the Gotrek and Felix aspect I felt was absolutely phenomenal. I remember that I'll never forget reading through Kinslayer and Slayer for the first time, and like Kinslayer especially is just like, oh, my heart. It's not often a book makes me cry, but that book made me cry. It was wonderful in a painful way.
Kinslayer was my favorite of the two. Most people, I think Slayer's one of my top rated books on like Goodreads or Amazon. But it seems to be a thing for me that my favorites tend not to be always other people's favorites. I liked Kinslayer partly because it's a bit quieter. I think there's a bit less action to it than Slayer, and although I write a lot of action, I do tend to prefer scenes where there's just chats. I liked sort of the more characterful moments we had, and I thought and I liked it was almost like a little farewell tour of the provinces when Felix heads from Altdorf up to Kislev. He gets to because I didn't know then I knew it was called the End Times, but I didn't know that it was all going to end by then. It was only I think I was partway into Slayer that I knew that it was actually going to go boom and there's no more Old World. I guess it sort of took on a bit of a resonance for me after.
So looking back did they have kind of like a general set of bullet points for you when you initially took on the project? Were they like, you need to do XYZ, or was it kind of like just kind of find a way to tell the story in your own way to bring it to a close?
How spoilery are we?
You can go as all the spoilers, because if in my experience, it's not gonna, it's not gonna, still not gonna prepare them for a lot of the reveals and how you get to the reveals in those books.
Well, I'll try not to go too spoilery all the same while going slightly spoilery. So for Kinslayer, at least I was given a title. So I was basically, so this was the tough job I was given. That we want, this character's going to die, and we want Gotrek to kill him. Off you go.
Oh my God, really? That's it? Oh my God.
So I had to come up with a plausible reason for this guy to kill this guy, and but the genius of Bill King, I found. I basically went back and reread all the books because I had to find it, and so I hadn't really. This is something perhaps that you don't realize reading until you go back and like properly read them. That Bill King doesn't really tell you much about the background of the characters, but he tells you just enough to make you think that he's told you a lot about the background of the characters. So these little snippets that Snorri is thinking, I think it's in Dragon Slayer, about his past. They're not giving you much, but they give you just enough for me to then say, oh, this is why then this happens.
Yeah.
And although it seems ridiculous, someone who's read Dragon Slayer will probably remember. If they won't remember, they'll go back and go, oh yeah, it all makes sense. It's as if there was a plan. And it's because basically Bill King's told you so little that almost anything can happen.
It felt like such a, like, it's and so impressive and shocking to me that they were just kind of like, yeah, just kind of figure out why you would do that. Because it felt like such a natural, like someone had always been holding on to that idea of like, this is the truth behind what happened with Snorri and Gotrek in the past. It was like, yeah, that makes total sense. Of course, that would be why, you know, they took the Slayer Oath and stuff like that, which I imagine, I mean, I can't imagine something more daunting than being like, yeah, here's a beloved, like 30-year-old series. And there's these secrets people have been pondering about for 30 years and time for an answer. Good luck.
In terms of end time events, though, so obviously it was a bit end times adjacent. It was just end time stuff going on around. So although I hadn't read everyone else's books, I had been at the meetings where we discussed what was going to happen. There were meetings. They were like Horus Heresy style, all getting together at Nottingham to talk about what's going to happen. And so I tried to include them. Like there was the big wall when they get to Ostermark that they have to get over, and then in Slayer, I knew that certain things would have happened. Obviously, Altdorf has fallen by that point. And in terms of the ending, I think that was all me. Obviously, we had to be something satisfying for the Slayer's doom. And again, I think it's hard now looking back over so long, but I get.
Yeah, it's been
I believe that, like that his sort of his meeting with Grimnir and then how he passes at the end. I'm pretty certain it was all mine, and I'm pretty certain that it was me as well to have his doom be what it was. It worked out conveniently further down the road.
Yeah, I was about to ask, did you like have any idea that you'd be bringing him back later in AOS, or was that just a really happy accident?
No. So that the plan at the time, at least the plan as it was given to me, was that this was the end. It was Finn. Big line. End of Gotrek.
Wow,
I don't know why they chose to bring him back. I mean, it was successful. I mean, Realm Slayer is definitely my most successful thing. How much of that is down to me, and how much is down to Brian Blessed? Name on the front, I don't know, but
well,
yeah,
we'll swing around.
Sound business decision for them.
We'll swing around to some of those AOS goodies in a minute, but I mean that's incredible. I mean, I mean, just thinking, I know in the Total War community especially, Kinslayer has had such an impact because the depiction of Throg was incredible. Throg, like, that cemented for so many people Throg as a character and what he's like, as far as like how he should talk, how he thinks, what his mission is, like what his objectives are. And I mean, we see that reflected in the role-playing game when they released Sea of Claws, I think last year. The Throg they went with is the Kinslayer Throg, who's such a it's just.
I did.
Oh, no,
I did go on. I did go on Total War as Throg to see if I could see my Throg in there.
Oh my god!
I didn't get along through it. I did start as Queek, and it was really nice that they'd put. Clearly, whoever had done it had read Headtaker, because in the bio there was stuff that happens in. They put that one of the heads was sleek sharp wit. So they'd obviously done that.
Yeah, to say that the community has been boiling ever since Norska came out to have them redo Throg's voice lines is a understatement. Because, like, he's supposed to be so eloquent and, like, he's supposed to be genuinely intelligent, not just smart for a troll. Not a huge fan of the direction they went with in his...
Imagine, although he's smart, I suppose he's got... maybe troll. I want to say Troggoth there. Troll.
Oh yeah, like
troll mouth shape and vocal cords. I suppose he might sound.
The way he sounds is fine. It's just like the fact that I don't know. He comes off a little more of brutish than I think he should, as far as like his word choice. Go. I do very much hope we're due at some point in the future for a Norska rework, and it'd be nice to see them take kind of another whack at his interpretation to make him more consistent with like his understandings as far as like how we see him in the Cubicle 7 and stuff like that.
Forgot about the Troggoth part. The Throg troll part. That was I do remember that. I think that was at BL's request as well, to sort of bring him back to his roots by fighting a troll. But also all the Kislev stuff. Maybe another reason why I'm quite fond of it. That I think I just read, Dan's Riders of the Dead and Graham's Ambassador series, which both tie quite into each other. And to take a few bits from that, the odd character and the dragon ogre at the end, who's straight from the Ambassador books, was that's nice. Touch.
Yeah, well, very. Those are some exciting fights, and like it really was such a great way to send off, and doing Be'lakor at the end. Also, so many great callbacks. Like Slayer does such a good job of when you get to the end and you realize that multiple of the demon baddies are coming back from the old books, and it's like, oh man, this is getting spicy.
It was really nice when I was doing the rereading and that bit where Malachi, that he wanted a different name for the ship, but he wasn't allowed it, and now it's his, and he can name it whatever he wants. That's just the sort of thing that can come out with a reread, and that people who are really familiar with the series will, appreciate having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and I think that was the part that impressed me so much, is you can tell reading Kinslayer and Slayer that there's so much love for all the past Gotrek and Felix books. And there's a lot of like fulfillment of prophecies or fulfillment of or payoffs to very many different Chekhov's guns that have been lying around for a long time. And virtually all of them get fired, which is insanely impressive, because that was a tall order for anybody.
There's a few that weren't. At least one I remember that I wish I could have got in somewhere. In the Nathan Long books, there was all that stuff about Otto, who was like smuggling forbidden lore or something. He was involved in some kind of magic book smuggling ring, something like that. I can't remember. Which, in the events of the end times, wasn't quite able to get onto. But that's the only one I think that was left. The only rifle that was left that I can think of, at least that I noticed.
I mean, I remember being impressed that you even pulled out like the kind of like the very vague prophecy that the Keeper of Secrets gives at the end of Elfslayer, and then the Keeper of Secrets shows up in this book, and you're like, oh dang, it's here to. I
can't remember it.
It's here to slap people around, but But the
Yeah.
bloodthirster reappearing, I think, was I loved that. I love that. He had to come back. That was great. For rematch, though, Gotrek was considerably stronger than he was back in the old days. He was able to throw down quite a bit more effectively.
Yeah, it's somewhere a joke about like he's Super Saiyan Goku.
Yeah.
At least in the AOS with his rune.
Yeah,
that's what he does.
So I guess kind of the last thing I'd like to kind of pick your brain about fantasy wise before delving into some AOS stuff, just because your AOS stuff I think is so fantastic, and I really would love to talk about it a little bit. So Thorgrim, such a great little novella. I kind of released alongside with I believe, if I memory serves, the 8th edition dwarf book kind of came out alongside it. And it there's a lot packed into that little book. As far as like we finally get Thorgrim Grudgebearer and Belagar Ironhammer depicted in a story, and Gorfang Rotgut, like that whole saga with him, such a badass way to end that character. I'll never forget kind of sitting there, and it's like David Guymer, when it comes to like the Carrick 8 Peaks matchup, so like Greenskins, Skaven, and Dwarfs, he just knows what he's doing. He just knows what he's doing with these races, which is so impressive.
So I saw it as a kind of a semi-sequel to Headtaker. So although sort of Queek's not in it, and there are no Skaven in it really, sort of with at least with the Gorfang Rock character, it is taking place after, so he's kind of been booted out of Carrick 8 Peaks. I really would have liked. So originally, it was going to be a novel. That was the original plan, but I didn't have the time to do it, so we decided to make it a novella instead. Would have been nice, perhaps, to have had
I would have sold my soul for a full novel version of that, but I am happy with what we got, though. But I would have sold my soul.
I'm still quite fond of it. I liked the greenskin side. I think that was probably my favourite part. The rock gut, and was there someone else? Was there a goblin in there?
Yeah, Rotgut's lieutenant, who is a hilarious character. The one with the gimp knee, because he gets run over by Gorfang at the beginning of the book. Skarsnik, Skarsnik, and his shaman. His shaman is an important character in the book.
Yeah, is it Oskrat? But he's in it as well.
Yeah,
he's kind of like.
I can't remember his shaman's name all of a sudden. He's such an important character, and I'm blanking on his name. Someone in the chat will remember for me.
He's a green Gandalf anyway.
He's literally Duff Skull. Thank you, chat. Yeah, Duff Skull. Yeah, he's literally Goblin Gandalf.
And
there was the orc shaman as well. Yeah, I actually thought Thorgrim, I don't know if they had told you to do this, but Thorgrim felt like it set up a lot of the end time stuff very, very well. As far as
the first time that I knew the end times was going to be a thing that was happening. So when Duff Skull comes in and says like the end times is happening in it, to whoever it was, that was me knowing for the first time that there was going to be this series of books and there was going to be the invasion.
Yeah, it set up.
Yeah,
it kind of set up that idea of there being a chosen of Mork and a chosen of Gork, with Skarsnik being the Morky one, and I think Duff Skull was out there trying to find his orc counterpart and hoping that's what Gorfang was going to be, but then Gorfang was like, nah, I'm gonna go fight, which was
really nice that Guy Haley. So we talked when he was writing Rise of the Horned Rat, so that he could take on a lot of the characters that were in Thorgrim appeared in that, like Belagar and Kemer and the Reckoner. Thorgrim himself, of course. And of course he had all the characters from Headtaker as well. Queek and Scar were in there. So, at first I wasn't sure I wanted to read it to see what happened, but I thought he did it all really well. It's kind of nice in a way to see someone else's take on your characters.
Yeah. Well, that was such I mean, I my heart goes out to anyone that was writing for end time stuff, because they just had like such an impossible amount of stuff trying to squeeze into an itty bitty space. But
I'm so happy that Scar Bloodtail survived. I like to think he made it through to the Age of Sigmar somehow, and he's got a garden in Iran.
So kind of jumping from the end times into Age of Sigmar, you've done incredible stuff for Age of Sigmar. Like, I don't care how anybody takes it, I will flat out say, as far as I'm concerned, you saved the Dwarden. Like, the Dwarden went from being very bland and really struggling to have an identity to something amazing, because a lot of your writings have really kind of helped them evolve, at least in my view, from a lore perspective. Like, kind of starting with Realm Slayer, but now going into like the return of Grombrindal, and all this stuff. Were you always kind of, when you kind of got the opportunity to work on the Dwarden, what was kind of in your head as far as like tying it back to fantasy versus having it be its own standalone thing and balancing that equation?
I always try and think of it as what it is now, in terms, rather than callbacks to how they were. Although I think the Dispossessed, and to an extent the Iron World, are to some extent the dwarfs that we're familiar with from the before times. Whereas Fire Slayers and Caradron, they have similar characteristics. But I guess it's like, it's like a soundboard where you've got some of those characteristics have been pushed up and some have been pulled down. So they're still recognisably dwarfs, but they're extreme in certain ways. Like, I guess, for instance, the Caradron are perhaps even more gold mad, and they're more into their written.
They're really drawing up that uber
capitalist. On there is down. Whereas the Fire Slayers, again, they've got their gold lust turned up, but they're mad. They don't wear armor.
So when kind of looking at Realm Slayer, I think for me was kind of a big turning point as far as being able to really enjoy a lot of different aspects of Age of Sigmar lore that I kind of struggled with a little more. And like, whenever I talk to an old fantasy fan who hasn't gotten into Age of Sigmar because they're struggling with it a little bit, or they're just, they still kind of have hurt feelings, or however you want to word it, my recommendation is always Realm Slayer to start with. Because it was so funny to me. It felt like Gotrek was literally an old fantasy player who had gotten thrown into AOS because he has such funny, he's so angry about everything, and he has such goofy opinions as far as he still like refers. Go ahead.
It was quite deliberate, actually, on my part, because I think AOS must have been 1 or 2 years old then. It was quite fresh. And
I think we were just.
So I knew full well that there were a lot of angry people on Facebook and Twitter. So Gotrek was basically my distillation of all those people, because he's obviously seeing AOS for the first time, and he's always been a bit of he's stubborn. He doesn't like change because he's a proper dwarf, and no dwarf likes change. So. He is all those people who are seeing ice for the first time and going, dwarfs running around barefoot and riding lava dragons and necromancers in towns.
So I think his entrance when he first shows up, the first thing he does is punch a Fire Slayer prince in the face so hard he breaks his face, and you're just like, oh my god, okay, Gotrek, calm down, which is just so great. So it seemed like you had a lot of fun with that series, as far as like, was coming back to Gotrek and really getting to throw him into these bizarre new circumstances, and of course taking him into a really new power level as well. Like, although it's not official, I constantly refer to Gotrek as the God of Fire, because it really kind of seems like that is, even though he doesn't want it, that's kind of his inevitable role within the universe. Was there anything kind of in your head as far as where, when you were starting off, as far as like, this is the direction I really want to take him in, or this is my hopes for him in the future, stuff like that?
So again, this is something that we had a meeting for. I remember sort of headed down to GW and talking. It was Nick Mann, sorry, not Nick Mann, George Mann and Nick Kime in there, and the audio director and a few of the editors, and we sort of talked out loads of ideas of what Gotrek should be and what he's doing now. So I think that's when we came up with the idea of, so he's not looking for his doom anymore because he had that, even though it wasn't quite what he was expecting. So what's he up to now? And he's looking for Felix now, at least at that stage. That's what he was up to. And so that was when we had the idea of each chapter of Realmslayer would be, it's kind of like devoted to a new companion who's, it's almost like he's trialing a companion.
We're holding auditions
for new so the first chapter was kind of focused on Brodder, the Fire Slayer battlesmith, who's convinced that he's Grimnir reincarnated. And then the second one, it was Jourdain, who I was astonished turned out to be this sort of massive fan favorite. He was amazingly acted, and the artwork in the thing was fantastic as well. But yeah, suddenly everyone's like making Adassa armies and
Adassa, like that is like my biggest wish for a potential Cities of Sigmar like mini release would be Adassa, because that like they have such a cool theme. It's such a really cool theme from the first audio drama.
Well, you mentioned Cubicle 7 before, and it was nice when they appeared in their Cities of Fire supplement. They had their map with the Adassa on it, a little. Well, I can't say I'm surprised. I actually wrote the Adassa entry for that. So I knew it was going to be there, but it's still nice to see. And then the third one was Uthan Barrowwalker, the Necromancer, and the fourth was Malaneth there. And I guess the one he obviously liked most was Jourdain, but we were trying to sort of subvert what the old fantasy was to what AOS is now, with having like the Necromancer and the Witch Elf, and having him end up with the Witch Elf to show like, okay, we're in something new now.
Yeah, I mean, Malaneth was a fascinating companion too. It was a very different dynamic where it was almost like this love-hate dynamic, a very contentious relationship in some ways.
I did want to make it very different from Felix, so it's not like we're just filling the Felix role with someone who's not Felix. So I think, so yeah, in this instance, she's not with him because she wants to be, or because he wants her to be, like with Felix, like Gotrek was with Felix. He would want nothing better, at least at this stage, to have rid of her. And she would really rather not be there either, but she can't go back home until she gets this rune out of Gotrek, and she can't kill Gotrek because he's far too strong. She tries to poison him a few times in one of the short stories I wrote, but by the sequel to Realmslayer, Blood of the Old World, she's more kind of trying to maneuver him into, just elbow him into the way of a.
Yeah, let's at least be productive. Which, gotta say, Blood of the Old World also like fantastic. Like Realmslayer, it was interesting. Realmslayer and Blood of the Old World were definitely feel interconnected, but are very much telling different stories. Like Blood of the Old World felt like such a somber kind of love letter to a lot of the old stories, and like the whole reappearance of Thanquol, which is hysterical and brilliant, but also shows how much scarier he is now as like the Grey Lord. He's almost like a completely different faction in and of himself. But the Seraphon appearing, I loved that. If you can't tell, I mean, quite the Seraphon fan. So getting to have them actually interact with Gotrek was like a dream come true. I always felt so teased by like the Lair of the Serpent Queen back in the day, Gotrek and Felix, where it kind of talks about Gotrek encountering the Lizardmen, but we don't actually get to see it. So it was so awesome to get to see how the Slann are kind of like, oh, this Gotrek guy is he's kind of a interesting dilemma for us to consider. I thought you did such
A
an
lot.
awesome job handling that.
There hadn't been a lot of lizard men in fiction then. I think I just really wanted to include one. So
Well,
that was
I,
a
for one, really
okay. So
appreciated
I want one, and I'm gonna
it.
fit one in somewhere.
Getting that lizardman representation is great. They have had so much more Black Library lore in AOS than they ever did in fantasy. It's been like night and day. But then kind of beyond that, you also then did Grombrindal. Like you did the White Dwarf series that built up to revealing his resurrection, where you covered a lot of stuff about Grugni, and that was an amazing series, which of course has led to the Grombrindal anthology book. Also, absolutely amazing book. Was there any kind of like process or notable memories you have when kind of being pinged to approach bringing back such a kind of famous character?
Yeah, I was asked to do it like this. At the time that I was asked, I think they initially envisaged something like a more serialized that would be sort of 6. Was it 6 or was it 8? However many chapters it was across White Dwarf. I think it was 6.
It was 6 chapters, yes.
And I was really finding it difficult to think of a way to tell one story that would involve all the factions, which is what they wanted. So then I came back to them. How about the idea of something like thematically linked? Like they're not chronological, but there's a common theme that will join them together, and then conclude in the end one. And that is basically this idea that we went with, which is that there's some event within each story will focus on one of the factions of Fireslayers, Dispossessed, Caradron, Ironweld, and then we had Gotrek.
Yeah.
As a wild card. And they're in some situation, and Grombrindal, the White Dwarf, wanders in, as he is reported to do in those old stories, to give some advice, save the day, what have you. And then wanders out again. And then the final book brings them all together, which is the story of Grungni gathering up the stories that go into the... Because the story of Grombrindal in AOS is he's reforged, but not in the same way as the Stormcast. He's basically gathered together from all the stories of all the Duardin. And that is what he's made the new White Dwarf out of. So, yeah. So that's the final story, tying it all together. And because I guess it wasn't really what they wanted at first, I was pleased how well it seemed to go down. How well the stories were received in particular. And there were a few that I was particularly fond of. I did like the Old Whitebeard special in the tavern.
Yeah, that was an awesome story.
A very different kind of story for me. It's kind of... I think I do tend to write more action-y stories. And I did enjoy writing almost like a family saga set entirely inside the walls of this tavern.
Some really awesome, kind of Joseph Bugman references appearing in there, with like his axe Old Trustworthy making an appearance and stuff. And I gotta say, the conversations you wrote between the various like gods, each one kind of featured a different god appearing to speak with Grugni or Grombrindal.
Yeah, that was good actually. Yeah, I did enjoy having him talk to like, Tyrion in disguise and have a standoff with Nagash and...
Yeah, that Nagash conversation. Oh, it was so good. It was so good.
Nagash Sigmar. Yes, he talks to Sigmar as well.
Yeah, Sigmar, Nagash, the Marathi fight, awesome, absolutely awesome. Even has that showdown with Zinch, also super awesome. Just like, God, those were peak fiction.
Yeah, I forgot the bit where he sees Khorne. You see,
yeah,
that was a nice scene where he just sees the axe going to smash city. Hi.
I am desperately hoping that maybe in 4th edition, we get either a new Dwarden faction or something. But I am so ready for a Grombrindal playable mini. So ready.
I think it's already actually. I could like picture Grumney, you know, a giant Duarden figure stood over his anvil, very dynamic, hammering something out.
Yeah, I am ready for the like the Dwarven, like they have these two, you know, they've got two realms sort of dedicated to them with fire and metal, but they're the only races that don't have kind of that avatar figure yet. And I'm ready. I am ready for the age of the Dwarven. bring it on. But yeah, and it's everything's kind of been lining up so well alongside your novels. Like kind of looking at the Broken Realms. Broken Realms really tied in well with the return of Grugni, and going into third edition and stuff. The Grombrindal stuff has tied in so nicely with that. It's been just absolutely fantastic. But is there any so kind of looking to the future with the old world, are there any hopes you have as far as like maybe potential projects and stuff? Would you be interested in kind of returning to the Skaven or Dwarfs of the old world and continuing their stories on as we head back to fantasy here in the near future?
I mean, I guess I've not said anything yet about there being fiction in the old world. I mean, one hopes, I guess, if they're going to go back in a big way, there will be.
Guess what?
But yeah,
sells.
Guess the only, but obviously you have to have a whole new set of Skaven characters.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Icket Claw might still be alive 200 or 300 years ago. The dwarf ones, at least, are probably still there.
I would love to see you take on, I think it's High King Alricsson, who was before Thorgrim. But like Thorgrim's alive, like he's a prince at the time, so like I'd love to see what Thorgrim's up to. You know, he's 200. He's 200 years younger still, but you know, I think Thorgrim's like a little over 400 or something in the modern setting, so he's still not, you know, he's not a beardling, but he's still notably younger.
I wonder if he'll still. I guess we won't know yet. I was just gonna wonder if there'll be a Prince Thorgrim special character.
Ah, God, I hope so. Like, I know they're going to be telling new stories, but I do hope we get lots of like we know we're getting like Cetra back and stuff like that. So I really hope they lean into a lot of the characters who are still around. But yeah, like the Skaven would be wild because like there's nobody from that we know from the Skaven. I think like
I guess it's possible that Icket Claw, because he's kind of semi-immortal, isn't he? He's got depending on how old he is, he could be around.
Yeah, I don't think he's quite started up yet, because I know, if memory serves, the Council of 13 we have in like the 8th edition setting is about to be formed at the end. Oh man, there's your callback.
Where's the history of this? Where's the timeline page?
Lord Skrolk and Icket Claw are the two maybes.
Oh yeah, pretty much.
Those two are old boys.
There we go. Timeline. So let's touch on the timeline about what he gets up to. I thought it might be on the timeline like Icket Claw goes to Lustria.
It'd be nice. I'm trying. I know Icket Claw. I know he's really old. I just can't remember when he kind of starts off. But I know he's really close to around that ballpark.
It's got that smell. Got that old book smell.
Is there any particular characters that kind of come to mind as far as like someone you might like, whether in fantasy or Age of Sigmar? Is there any kind of character that's kind of high on your wish list as far as a character you'd love to take a crack at one day in a hypothetical scenario where you could pick anybody?
I've mentioned to people that I would really love to try High King Volturnos.
That would be super interesting. The High King of the Idneth Deepkin.
It's a long time ago that I did Curse of the Everliving. But that's when the idea first came to me. I thought it'd be really nice to sort of tackle it, because he's the last of the Sith Racer. He was around when the race began. He presumably met Teclis.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice to sort of tell his life story, basically, rather than set it in the present, set something across the whole span.
Yeah, I would read the hell
Before
out
the
of
fall
that.
of the Sith Age to the present. That was kind of like, yeah, that would be like my dream AOS project.
Well, I hope one day we get to see it, because that would be excellent. Like, High King Volturnus is a fantastic character that I would love to know more about, because he does have a very unique perspective compared to the rest of the Deepkin. It's kind of more of a almost not, he's not, you know, not necessarily a demigod, but he's an elevated
above.
being.
He's like the Primarch of the Deepkin.
Yeah, that's a fair way to put it.
The old world there. Hard to say because so many of the characters we're familiar with aren't there.
Well, let's pretend they were. Like, just is there anyone that kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, assuming Claw, I guess, because he was my favorite as a kid. It would be nice to play with him.
He is a fantastic character. I love his depiction in Doom of Thanquol. Doom of Thanquol really had a bunch of Skaven special characters pop up. Yeah, that whole book is so fun, especially focusing on the first iteration of his nuke, which thankfully doesn't go off, but he did end up getting some vengeance later in the end times with that.
I guess a new Hamilcar.
Hamilcar is so great. Yeah, which kind of you've done quite a few other projects as well in AOS. As far as I want to say the newest book, your most recent book was what, Kragnos?
Yes.
Which has been very well received. Very, very popular book. I've got it over on my shelf. It's on my to read list. I haven't quite gotten around to it yet, but it's coming up soon. I was able to finally get a copy. It was actually not easy to find.
Yeah, like some of the characters I got to sort of build in there, and the world building making sort of really gory. It's just I think it was a novella by Evan Dickens. It was the first time that I can't remember what it's called, I'm afraid. Except it was a novella by Evan Dickens. It was the first time I'd seen the realm, sort of the character of the realm, really be important to the story and almost be sort of foregrounded really powerfully. And it made an impression on me when I read it. I thought, oh yes, that's how AOS should always be, because it's not. Before I read that, I think I was writing my AOS a bit like it's Warhammer Fantasy with some wacky bits thrown in. After that, yes, no, this, like, the realm it's a thing. It's almost it's an animated thing of pure magic. It's
right. It's
like,
it's alive. Yeah.
Go is not just it's got some big animals. The landscape is alive. It tries to eat you. So Kragnos has things. It's got these boulders that run uphill chasing other boulders, and they're fighting over a river, and then the river comes alive and tries to sort of attacks everyone. And there's loads of that sort of thing in Kragnos, and that, yeah. So I enjoyed that.
Well, and that's fantastic.
Really going to town with what AOS can do. That's what I like.
Yeah, which is such a strength of the setting. Like, I think AOS really is at its best when it fully embraces that it's a crazy magical place. You know, it's not really like, there are very small little grounded parts, but for the most part, it's pretty wild. Well, that is super duper awesome. As far as I don't know if you've got any, because we're kind of coming up on time here now, when it was me looking up at here. Are there any kind of future projects you'd like people to kind of be on the lookout for, as far as anything that might be coming down the chute in the near future, or anything that's released recently that you'd like to have a specific call out for?
Unfortunately, I don't think there's anything I've done that I can call out yet. This has not been,
the to be announced, TBA. keep an eye out.
Let me think if I've got anything. I've got a couple of AOS things written and done, and another one waiting feedback. So I've got probably a few things on the way. It's ridiculous how hard it is to remember what I've done, what hasn't been announced yet. I think that's it. 2 or 3 AOS things. But yeah, the last thing I did was Angron. I think that was the last thing of mine that came out.
I've heard good things about that. I traditionally don't pick up 40k books, but I have heard echoes from my 40k counterparts, other content creators. That seems to be very, very, as with pretty much everything you've written, very well received. I have yet to see you swing and a miss. It has always been such a delight to read your works, really and truly. But with that, I think we're pretty much at the end here. I don't know if there's anything you kind of have any closing thoughts for everyone. If you could tell them where to find you as far as like socials, or if you've got a personal site for anything else like that. I don't know if you do like any kind of like fan releases or what have you, but feel free to share with everybody where they can find you for stuff like that.
So yeah, I got my Facebook author page. I'm on Facebook just as me, just as David Guymer. Twitter as Warlord Guymer, because I made it when I was just after doing Queek, so it kind of seemed sensible at the time to be a Warlord. And yeah, I sometimes do. So I get author copies. I sometimes get a huge stack, and I don't know what else to do with them, and I will occasionally give them away. So yeah, if that's what you're after, you may occasionally find them on my socials.
Awesome. Well, I'll be sure to include all of those links somewhere down below for anyone that wants to check that out. And thank you again so much for coming by. It was fantastic to get to chat with you and kind of listen to your thoughts on things. You've made many of my absolute favorite books when it comes to Warhammer Fantasy, to say the least, and Age of Sigmar. The Gotrek series is very near and dear to my heart. And then like the Queek Headtaker novel, Thorgrim novel, everything, really everything that you've touched has just kind of been gold. So just want to thank you so much for all of your work and effort over the years.
Thanks for having me on. Like I said, it's really nice to get out in inverted commas and talk to people. And yeah,
Games Workshop's nice. Kind of let you out of the dungeon.
Real nice trip down memory lane, because as I've forgotten all about Throg.
Oh, well, we haven't.
Very nice to hear these things.
Well, yeah, thank you again so much. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Hope you all have a lovely Sunday afternoon. I've got to go do other things. So we will see y'all again later. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.